What's good with you? Back in black with another video. If you guys are new to the channel and you love shooting games just like me, make sure you aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. Today, what I wanted to talk to you guys about is what is it that you like so much about shooting games, or more specifically, what is it that drives you to have the playstyle that you actually have when you play these shooting games? Everybody knows the three main archetypes that I'm talking about. The first and, I guess the most revered one is the rusher, the slayer for lack of better words. You know what I'm talking about, the person who runs around the map, at a pretty fast speed, usually relying on their fast reaction and quick twitch fibers of their fingers to outwit their opponent in any given situation. And sometimes they put a lot of thought into what they do, sometimes they don't, and it's really just all natural. But either way, this is a playstyle that is highly reverenced among players and usually is the stuff that you will see on YouTube or in tournaments and stuff like that. We also have the more reserved player, or I guess as most people have come to know them as the camper. This is the player who takes their time. Maybe sometimes they're analyzing the situation, and these are people who pick the best place on the map to set up, or maybe sometimes they don't even pick the best place to set up on the map. Sometimes they just pick a place that has a lot of concealment from other players. Maybe you could say these are people who will wait until they have the perfect opportunity to engage you, whether that be shooting you in the back or just from an angle you didn't suspect. But unfortunately, I guess you could say these are the type of players who haven't necessarily garnered the most respect from the general player base, but at the same time seems to be a player base, not even a player base, a player type that is in abundance, because I would say in most games, in my personal experience, I find a lot of players who would rather sit in a bush rather than run around as fast as possible trying to engage everybody that they can. That's something that's usually reserved for players of high skill, quote unquote. Of course, we have your players who fall somewhere in the middle. It's all a spectrum if we're being completely honest here. But I like to call these players adaptables. This is kind of the category that I will put myself into because, in every shooting game that I play, I feel that there are some situations where it is better to be aggressive, maybe throw caution to the wind and just run in, relying solely on your gun skill. But on the flip side, there are also times where you're better off, biding your time, maybe waiting for the enemy to run by you, or perhaps waiting for reinforcements to pull up on you so you can have some, teammates to support you and not have to do everything by yourself. And sometimes that just may require you to, sit in a house or sit in a bush, no matter how distasteful it may be for an extended period of time. Some would call it boring, or some would say that it doesn't make for good gameplay. But, I just feel like as long as, winning is the priority, which is my main priority when it comes to me playing a video game, I think that's just, the better way to go about it. No matter how you play these games or, how you play shooting games in general, I find it fascinating to, analyze the motive or the thought process behind whatever is going on, because there's different types of players out there and not everybody thinks the same. And I just was really trying to figure out why people act the way they act when it comes to these shooting games. Piggybacking off what I said like 5 seconds ago, not only am I interested in why players play the way they do, generally speaking, but I'm also interested in it because I want to know like how it affects one's chances of winning a game. And I say that in respect that I know that playstyles and how they affect winning will vary from game to game, because some games just require you to play a certain way or promote a certain playstyle. So take this with a grain of salt and know that I'm speaking generally here. And the reason I even mention anything about winning is because I feel like that's the most important aspect of playing, and right alongside having fun. But in the same respect, I would know that some people would argue that having fun is more important than winning. I would take the position to argue that if you're winning and you're playing with friends, 9 times out of 10 you're probably having fun at the same time, because when you're winning and you have people to win alongside with, why would you not be having a good time with those people? You know what I'm saying? Essentially what I'm getting at is that what makes a shooting game fun might vary from person to person. Some people will say that winning is the same thing as having fun, and some people will say that winning has no impact on if you're having fun or not at all. But one thing that I'm sure we can all agree on as shooting game fans is that success, is definitely one way you know that you're having fun when you're playing a shooting game. And how can you tell if you're being successful or not? That's definitely if you're getting kills. If you're getting kills, you're having fun in a shooting game. I'm pretty sure there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you're not getting kills and you're playing a shooting game, you probably feel like you're wasting your time or you're frustrated, because what's the point of having a game with a gun in your hand and not being able to kill any of your opponents with it? You know what I'm saying? That being said, I think how players find success early on when they're playing a shooting game is a big indicator of the playstyle that they will develop, because when you're getting kills, that's positive reinforcement. And if you're getting that positive reinforcement, you're going to keep doing the same thing or performing the same actions that you perform to get those kills. So let's say somebody's picking up Call of Duty or whatever game for the first time, and the first way they get their first 10 kills is by sitting in a bush and shooting somebody in the back. Because they did that the first 10 times, they're going to usually end up in a playstyle where they're relying on using the environment or shooting people in the back to have any type of success in the game, whether that is necessarily effective in getting their team to win or not. It doesn't really matter so much at that point, because if you can't individually have success when you're playing a shooting game, why would you go as far as to think about how you can help the team if you can't even help yourself? You know what I'm saying? I'm already talking about reserve players or quote-unquote campers, so I guess I'll keep using them as an example to further explain my point, and then we'll go into the other playstyles and the pros and cons of them. But if the first way you achieve success in any shooting game is by, sitting in a bush or sitting in a corner and waiting for somebody to run by you, most people are going to consider that distasteful or non-skillful. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because every player has to get their bearings and find their first steps in whatever they're playing, whether that be Call of Duty, Apex, Hell Let Loose, or whatever. And to your point again, some games actually promote that kind of reserved, campy playstyle. Speaking again, Hell Let Loose is definitely a game where you would say that camping would actually have its advantages, because one, you need some teams to play defense, and then two, because of the nature of the game and how fast you die, you want to be as careful as possible with every movement and action that you take. So somebody who's a little more reserved and doesn't rush around might actually fare better than somebody who's a rusher and comes from a game like Call of Duty. You know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense? Because I'm basically using an example of a nurture to explain why somebody has a certain playstyle that they do. If your first game is Call of Duty, I feel like you're more prone to rushing around, whereas if your first shooting game was Apex Legends or Hell Let Loose, you might be a little more prone to worry about staying alive as long as possible, no matter how you got to go about doing it. Like I said earlier in the video, I don't necessarily have a problem with people who have reserved playstyles or people who camp or who stay in a certain area for an extended period of time, but I feel like across all shooting games, the general disdain that most players have for these type of people is because they become very stagnant in their playstyle, or they show no will or desire to improve or expand their repertoire of what they can do. Again, this depends on the game, but 9 times out of 10, somebody who stays in a certain area the entire time is somebody who's not necessarily contributing to the team. And while it may be individualistically beneficial for them because they're getting a bunch of kills on unsuspecting enemy players who are running by, they'll hear that same backlash from the enemy that they would hear from their team, like, hey, you're just staying in one area, you're not moving, you're not doing anything. Which, I mean, that's really only fine in team deathmatch, but again, it's just a very, very stagnant kind of mindset where you're not really showing any desire to improve or get better at the game. Which is, I guess that's why in Call of Duty, which is where I come from for the most part, which is why people kind of shit on campers, because they're like, hey man, you're not even trying to move or show that you have any type of skill except for aiming at a doorway. You know what I'm saying? Which again, I can see why it's distasteful, and not to say that it doesn't have its time or place, like in battle royales or very, very fast TTK games like Insurgency, Sandstorm, or Hell Let Loose. But I don't want to talk about campers or reserve players forever, because rushers do kind of have their pros and cons as well. And I'm not going to sit up here and say that I'm the best player ever, but I feel like I do pretty well for myself in most shooting games. And I did used to rush a good little bit back in the day in those old school Call of Duties. I'm going to use myself as an example here, and I'm going to use Call of Duty as an example because that's the most playtime I have in any shooting game franchise across the board. And yeah, so Call of Duty 4 was the first Call of Duty that I played online. I used to camp a lot. I used to just pull out a M16 with a red dot sight, find like one of the best head glitches in the map, and just sit there and laser everybody with a 3-round burst. And while it was successful, and I did have a lot of fun doing it for a long amount of time, it got to a point where like that playstyle became a little stale, if you will, or I felt like I wanted to do something else, or I felt like I was gaining skill and I wanted to change it up or show that I had improved as a player, because you can't really show improvement just sitting behind some sandbags. I would say, because I used to watch a lot of YouTube, people like Drifter, who used to give you a lot of tips and tricks and stats for the guns, and people like Marka J, who were just like godly at the game for whatever reason. I would watch these people a lot and just pick up tips and tricks, whether it be from the gameplay or from the actual stats of the guns. And of course, I wanted to be considered good at the game, among my friends and just among the peers and people who I join lobbies and play with, because back in the day there was actually a really good Call of Duty community where we used to talk a lot, whether it be talking crap or actually getting along and making friends. But yeah, through gaining skill and just watching YouTube and stuff, I would, change my playstyle from the guy who used to camp to somebody who would pull out like a, MP5 or UMP45 or MSMC or the Scorpion from Black Ops 2 and just run around mowing people down using, fast reactions and twitch fibers. And yeah, that was kind of just what I aspired to be, because again, campers or people who are reserved all the time are people who are typically looked down. And for better or worse, like, my gun skill and stuff did get better at the game, but in a certain respect, that type of playstyle doesn't transfer over well to every type of shooting game that you will play. And being a shooting game connoisseur that I am, I had to learn the hard way that just because you can rush in Call of Duty doesn't mean that you should necessarily be trying to do the same thing all the time in Battlefield, because more often than not you will just end up dying a lot, or maybe you won't be helping your team as much with the objectives because you're too worried about getting kills, which there's a time and place for slaying the enemy team out too, don't get me wrong. But I just feel like this is where I leave the phase of trying to pub stomp all the time, and then I enter the phase of becoming the most important archetype of player, in my personal opinion, which I believe is the balanced player. As a player, I feel like no matter what type of shooting game that you're playing, it's always good to, just take a step back and do some type of reflection on where you are as a player, ways you can improve, ways you can help the team win more often. And of course, through all that, you also want to make sure you're also still having fun. But like I said earlier, success is the most kind of fun, and then if you're winning on top of that, then you'd be a liar if you told me that you're not having a good time. Which is why I think it's so important to not become stagnant in the way that you're playing, because especially if you're losing, it's really important to not become stagnant in the way that you're playing, because if you get bogged down in being a camper or being a rusher, then when you switch from Call of Duty to Battlefield, you're not gonna have the skills to translate over to that game. And this applies to battle royales as well as arena shooters. It's just that different games ask you for different things. And I feel like players who are more adaptable to the situation are, one, better at all shooting games overall, and two, they help their team win more often, which, three, translates to having more fun. Just to give you another example, I feel like players who are adaptable and balanced are usually the people who pick medic and like support roles in video games the most, because they have the skills to go and be like a purely offense character, or do all the DPS or damage or get all the kills or whatever, and sometimes they may be required to do that. But if you're playing with randoms, or if you're only playing with one friend and not like a full squad, which I assume most of you guys are, yeah, I feel like we need more balanced players out there. But that's just my personal opinion. What I wanted to ask you guys is, what kind of player do you identify as? Are you like a rushing kind of guy all the time? Are you like somebody who sits back and just lets the kills come to them, for lack of better words, or just take a more reserved approach? Or are you like me and you try to do a little bit of everything depending on what game you're playing or what situation you're in, and just try to, help your team get the win any way possible? Other than that, it was just a little bit of a discussion kind of video. It was on my mind. I was feeling a little, philosophical, or just wanted to take a little deep dive into the psychology of a shooting game player. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you leave a like and hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Black Guy out.